Hi class, I'm Kris and I'll be your English teacher for today. In today's lesson, we will grow our garden vocabulary. It won't be a difficult lesson because we will take words that we already know and learn how to use them in different ways by changing the way the word operates in the sentence. Okay, we have already seen one word today at which we will be looking in this lesson. And that word is garden. Now, when garden is a noun, what's it mean? It's the place where we plant all our plants. Right in the garden. Now, garden can also be a verb. And it stays exactly the same. Garden. To garden is to plant the garden. When we say garden, we're planting the plants. But it can also mean we are doing whatever is necessary to the garden. So if we are removing the weeds, like so, it's still gardening, to garden. Now, does garden have an adjective form? No, it does not. At least not outside of gardening, because gardening is an industry, and most industries have their own technical vocabulary. But many of these words, although they will be similar to the ones that we see here, are not used in everyday speech, simply because there is no context for them, quite like there is in their industries. Okay? I have already just given another away. Plant. When plant is a noun, we already know what that is. Just any little plant. Any little plant. Flowers. Anything in the entire plant family. And the verb we have already said is plant. To plant the plants. Simple enough, right? Now, plant does not have an adjective form either. Though, there are some ways we can make the word plant behave like an adjective. We can say plant-like. Now, there are some forms of life, like the fungus. And if there is more than one fungus, fungi. Now, fungi look and behave a lot like plants, but they're not plants. But we can say they are plant-like. Okay? And that way we can use one hyphenated set of words to make that comparison without directly calling them plants, because they're not plants. Understand? Okay. Another useful word, seed. What are seeds? We know that. They're baby plants that we place into the ground in order to grow into a new plant. And when we plant our seeds in the ground, that process is also a verb. To seed. What does to seed mean? It just means to plant seeds in the ground. Now, seed does have adjective forms. And these include seedy. However, be careful with the way seedy is used. Now, as early as the 800s, seed, the word seed, started to mean this, baby plants. That's when seed started to mean plant. And it was sometime in the 1500s that seedy as an adjective meant pertaining to seeds. But in the 1700s, some year in the 1700s, it gained a new meaning. Dirty. If something was seedy, then it was said to be dirty. Now, I don't know whether the original meaning of seed, which is about the plant, I don't know whether this new meaning came from the old one. I don't know. But today, in modern times, seedy almost always means dirty. Almost always. So, it's not a very good idea to use seedy as an adjective. Again, there are some better choices. Seed-like can describe objects, and it means that these objects are similar to seeds. There is another, seeded. Now, seeded means that something has had seeds planted in it, like the ground. So, if we have our garden, and we take and plant some seeds in the garden is now seeded. Okay? Now, a lot of these words that we have discussed have stayed the same. They haven't changed at all. But there are some words that look different when they change forms. For example, growth. Now we all know growth is what we want to see in our plants. It means the plant is getting bigger. The verb is grow. Now notice when we changed to verb, we lost the TH. So what can we say about TH in this context? The ending TH shows us that this word here is a noun. A noun. And once we take that TH and erase it, then we know we have the verb form. Does that make sense? Now, growth does not really have any adjective form that is commonly used. And the reason behind this is because growth can really mean anything that is coming off of something. So even if we have, say, a human arm and there's a growth on the arm, okay, there's no reason to say growth like, because we know that it is a growth. So this like is no longer needed, because earlier when we said seed like, the thing was, whatever object we were discussing was not a seed. It was only like a seed, similar to one. But growth is a very broad, wide word that can be used for many, many things. And so, really there's no adjective form simply because one is not needed. Because the context of the word growth can be applied to many, many things. And something either is a growth or it isn't one. Not similar. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, fruit is a noun. We like to grow fruit in our garden. Is there a verb form of fruit, though? There is. Fruiting is the process of producing fruit. We say to fruit. So, if we have a berry, normally what happens, it starts off with a flower growing, but once it fruits, it grows the actual berry. And there's also an adjective form of fruit. Fruity. It means similar to fruit. So a common way that fruity is used is with the sense of smell. So this berry can be said to have a fruity smell because it smells like fruit, because it is fruit. Fruity can also mean interesting in an unconventional way. which means something is interesting us because it's not something that we see every day. It's kind of odd. It's not really ordinary. Does that make a little sense? Okay. Another word, harvest. Now, the verb for harvest is the same as the noun harvest. To harvest. A harvest is when we gather our plants and we take the fruit off of the vines. There really is no adjective form for harvest. However, there are some words like harvest moon. Now, these are clearly two separate words. And we know that harvest is modifying moon because it's telling us what kind of moon it is. But when we look at both of these words, harvest is a noun, moon is a noun. That's because in English, a noun can modify another noun, just like an adjective can modify a noun. Alright? The goal of this lesson was not so much to gain new vocabulary, but to show you the different ways we can use old vocabulary in new ways. Because with English, a lot of the times what we do, we use words that we already have at our disposal in new ways in order to create new meaning. As we saw in today's lesson, a lot of these words that can be used as nouns can also be used as verbs or even adjectives. So, by looking more deeply into the words that we already know, we can expand our vocabulary and our usage without having to learn new words. See you next time.